Hello and welcome to M&A Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. We dig into what you need to know and how not to kill the sell of your business. Now here's our host, Rick J. Krebs, Mergers and Acquisitions Advisor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. And I'm coming to you from the beautiful mountains of Heber City, and I have my friend Scott, who's in Park City, which is pretty close. Welcome, Scott.
Yeah, Rick, this is great. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, as am I. So Scott and I met recently through a mutual friend, and we had lunch, and I so enjoyed my conversation with Scott. Scott is an expert. He's an attorney. We won't hold that against him. Yeah, he hears that all the time. But Scott is an expert in the field of representing clients as an attorney, an M&A attorney. And I say it all the time, and I repeat it. It's like you have to have a deal guy. You have to have an attorney who knows what they're doing, who's been there, done that, and does this full time. Because there's so many nuances to every transaction. There's so much going on. And anyway, I'm so looking forward into diving into the question, Scott. But before we get started, I'd like to learn something personal about you. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got to be an attorney doing M&A.
Sure. One shameless plug. So I'm the head of M&A. Rick already said I'm a lawyer, head of M&A at Sklar Kirsch, which is a California law firm. We're in Los Angeles, providing advice in corporate real estate, bankruptcy, and entertainment law. So that's my shameless plug. And I also, I'm an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School, teaching a venture capital and startup class. Students tell me they like that class, very hands-on practical class. I think, Rick, something that folks always find amusing or interesting is I've been married 31 years to a lovely woman that I met in 10th grade. So we've been together a long time. The problem is, she knows me from 10th grade, so I cannot pretend I was cool or, captain of the football team or anything interesting. She was there, and God bless her that she stuck with me. So, as I'd say, people find that interesting. I'm a ice hockey fan. I enjoy skiing, if it's what's got me in Utah. And I try desperately not to let this job, which can be a 24/7 job, because we're ultimately in the customer service business and we're beholden to the transactions we're working on, just like you, calls all day and night potentially. So I try, on the one hand, to be responsive and professional and all of that stuff, but I try to have some sort of life outside of the job. I think I'm doing a better job than I probably was when I was young.
Great. I appreciate that. And I so appreciate that there's men and women like yourself who do the legal side of it. Because the legal side to me is I don't want to say boring, it's just grueling. So I'm so glad that we have people like you doing that. Now, you specialize in transactions of a certain size. So tell us about your wheelhouse.
Yeah, so while I had done over the course of my career public company work and mergers and acquisitions involving sophisticated either public companies or even sophisticated private companies, at the firm I'm at today, our sweet spot is privately held companies, buy and sell privately held companies, probably $10 million to about $350 million is our nice little sweet spot. Mostly, if I'm generalizing, and I presume it's the same for you, Rick, most of these are very successful family-owned businesses or businesses that were started 2-3 generations ago by somebody, I like to say, who got into it because it's what they knew how to do. They had to put food on the table. They had to feed their family. And through, American success story, hard work and good luck and serendipity and all the things that you try to put together, some under your control and some not under your control, they've become very successful businesses. And it's each one, it comes with a terrific story. But that's where we spend our day these days, either buying or selling, as I say, not public company and private company.
Gotcha. And even though you're in LA, you can do transactions all around the country, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the M&A practice is really a national one. If there was a thing, and I'll just get in the weeds for 1 second, Delaware is really the specialty area, Delaware law. And so if you're a corporate lawyer anywhere in the U.S., you speak Delaware, and then more importantly, the practice, the issues, the things we see and advise on for M&A are really the same state to state to state. So yeah, while our focus is Southern California, we do deals all over the place.
Gotcha. And why Delaware? Why do people look to go under Delaware law?
Well, historically, Delaware law is viewed as very consistent, clear. It has years and years of use. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people use it, the more they get comfortable with it. The court systems historically gave very clear guidance. The reason I keep saying historically, and I'll come back to it in a second, and so it's almost like a network effect. And then the more people that use Delaware, the more people conversant in it. And so the corporate club just got very, very comfortable with Delaware, and the Delaware legislature is very responsive to the corporate M&A group, and they really update their laws. So all of which, the soundbite is it gives you a very consistent place to operate. Other states, the court system is not focused on corporate law, so the judge may have a criminal matter, a divorce matter, or a corporate matter, and just you're not getting the consistent results. And so, right, for business people, you want to have some consistency. People like me, when you're giving advice, you want to be able to say with some confidence, here's how it goes, versus listen, we don't know what the judge in this state is going to say. It's all aimed at confidence and consistency. The reason I say historically, and I'm not going to go too far into it, if you're reading the papers, Elon Musk and others have taken a very different view of Delaware, and other states like Texas, Nevada, Wyoming are pushing to get some of that business. So there's a big debate. It's really in the weeds legal stuff about whether Delaware has lost the sheen, TBD. But anyway, back to your original comment, a good M&A lawyer can handle mergers and acquisitions transactions really anywhere. The issues, the things we're going to get into, Rick, that's important to protect your client, my role, and some of the things that you hit on. At the end of the day, it's a business deal. And the business deal and the issues that come up are consistent across the board, again, regardless of where the business sits.
Gotcha. So it's business friendly.
Delaware in particular is viewed as business friendly. Again, with the asterisk of the recent developments, again, driven by Elon Musk and others.
Gotcha. So talk to me a little bit about the role of the M&A lawyer in the transaction. I've said this many times. It takes a team, right? And I'm the M&A advisor, the sell side advisor. We have a CPA, but what do you see the role of the attorney being in the transaction?
So I'll hit that in 1 second. You started by pointing out, and for the audience, I think it's important to know, Rick said, boy, you need a specialist. You need an M&A lawyer, not, and I'm not denigrating. These are all very talented lawyers, but the lawyer who handled the lease for the business, the lawyer that has done the will for the founder. These are all important people, all very qualified in their field. But the analogy is like a doctor. If you've got a problem with your foot, you're seeing a podiatrist. If you have a problem with your heart, you're seeing a heart specialist, and so on. And that's the analogy. M&A is a specialty. It's its own little club with its own little practices, and that's really why you need an M&A lawyer versus the historical person who, again, likely is very good and has a bunch of institutional knowledge. But if you don't know mergers and acquisitions, you're at a disadvantage. That's the setup, and Rick, you hinted at that earlier.
Yeah, so let me interject here a little bit. I just closed a transaction where we had a lawyer who was not an M&A specialist, right? They were more a business lawyer. And I want to tell the listeners, I don't know what the dollar value of that, how much it increased their bill, but they didn't know what they were doing. They try to pretend that they do know what they're doing. They weren't a team player, right? And so I would say at least $10, $20, $30,000 more on the bill than what should have been because they chose a business lawyer, not an M&A lawyer.
Yeah. And Rick, of course, I don't know that situation, but in addition to the legal fees, Rick said 20 or 30,000. There's potentially, again, I don't know it, but potentially the issues may have been missed. Again, I'm saying it just in a vacuum, but like again, you think about my medical analogy. There are certain issues that come up in a purchase or sale of a business. And so you want to work with someone who's had experience doing that first, right? Nobody would come to me if they needed a will done, even though I'm a lawyer and I guess legally I could do it. I wouldn't be the person to draft the will. I don't know what I'm doing in it.
Yep. Exactly right. And what I see when we get non-M&A legal counsel, they get out in the weeds and they're concerned about therefores and heretofore and wherefore, all of that. And then we missed some key elements on the reps and warrants, right? And so they're lose focus on the wrong things, and ultimately hurt the client. Yeah. Interesting.
So assuming you've hired, a good M&A lawyer to be part of the team, and I echo Rick's comment, this is a team sport. You need so the role of the M&A lawyer, once you get past finding the buyer or the seller, in other words, setting up the business deal itself, generally speaking, that's what Rick is doing. Rick is out touting the company and getting the best deal. I'm speaking on the sell side, the best deal possible for the sellers. He's found the right buy. So the lawyer is project manager. Big part of the job is being the project manager or the quarterback. That sounds cooler, but it's a project management job. Coordinating all the different legal and non-legal people on the team. I'm not a tax lawyer, but I've got to know enough about tax to sort out the tax issues, pay attention to them. There's employment law matters. There's intellectual property. There's regulatory. There's antitrust. That's all in the legal space. Then I don't want to lose sight of the business deal. Rick has cut a fantastic business deal. The folks selling their business are going to get millions of dollars. Well, I need to pay attention to that, of course, and make sure it works. There's any number of negotiations that are going on. Rick is look, the role of somebody like Rick on a deal is shuttle diplomacy, relationship building, plausible deniability, right? It's helpful if things start to go sideways. The buyer and the seller who are going to have potentially a relationship, the seller might let Rick go off and do some negotiating, and again, plausible deniability. It's nice to have a spokesperson. And yet all of that needs to find its way into the transaction document. So the project management role is coordinating, paying attention to that. I also describe it to the junior lawyers that there's a game of, do you remember the old card game of memory? We flip over one card over here on the right, and then you got to say, wait a second, I've seen that before. That's over here on the left. So it's connecting the dots. So the project manager, Rick, you'll report back and say, I just had a conversation X, Y, Z, and I need to say, oh, wait a second, that affects this. Or my tax colleague will say, look, we want to do X for tax. And I have to think about it and say, well, yeah, that works. Well, maybe, boy, that's a problem with the regulators. Well, whatever, but it's the connecting of the dots. And then for the audience, a big chunk of what we do, again, speaking on the sell side, is translation and tour guide, or whatever phrase you want to use, explaining what's going on to people, right? I want to make sure that my clients are educated about what's going on. They're all very sophisticated about their business, of course. That's why they've got a successful business. And frankly, they're probably successful because they haven't spent time with lawyers in a good way. They've been running their business successfully. It's terrific. But now we're very much in the weeds in a legal document with a number of legal issues and concepts that, like any club, if it's the first time you show up at the club meeting and people are speaking in, whatever hip, cool phrases the club uses, but you're the first time member, you don't know the acronyms, you don't know the lingo. Again, it also goes back to why a non-M&A lawyer is at a disadvantage doing this. And so a big chunk of my job is to explain to clients, here's what all of that means. Here's the issue to you in plain English. Here's why you should care or not. And I call that the translation and the hand-holding. Most of our clients, Rick, I presume same for you on the sell side, it's their first and may even be first and last transaction, which is terrific and great, but they're in a world with a lot of, I don't know, legal mumbo jumbo or it's swirling around them.
Yeah.
It's going to focus on the rate.
So I got a question. Besides choosing the wrong lawyer, what other mistakes do you see clients make?
I think my headline answer to you that the challenge with buying and selling a business is nobody likes surprises. So I'll put that out there as the headline. And so now to your question about mistakes lead to anything that leads to a surprise. The mistakes, some of the mistakes, which is probably a little bit different than what your question was getting at, which I'll come back to, but look, every business has some sort of hair. It just does.
Yep. Hair on the deal, we call it.
There always is. And so one of the mistakes is sellers thinking, you know what, I don't need to tell anyone about this. Yeah, so I'll keep this to myself. And that then leads to, ultimately it'll come out, the surprise factor. So I put that in, surprise is a mistake, but thinking things will just go away. And then probably
Hold on. Hold your breath, close your eyes, cross your fingers, and hope it goes away, right? And not a good strategy.
Correct. And these things, unlike a good wine, they don't age well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well said.
Right. And look, anyone that's doing deals has Rick that hair on a deal. So anyone that's doing deals regularly knows there's problems at every deal, meaning people are not put off by problems. I'm not saying they're happy when a problem comes up, but people know how to deal with them. And so put that up against the last minute surprise. The reason it upsets people is they say, well, listen, if you had told me about this, 3 weeks ago, we could have addressed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So problems are best handled head on, period. I'm going to repeat it. Any problem is best handled head on, over disclose, and you run into fewer problems. You're still going to have problems. I love what you said there, Scott. Every deal has problems, but you don't have these major blow up, kill the deal, rant and rave, and just leave in disgust problem.
Exactly, because listen, people want to do the deal. The buyer people still want to do the deal, and people like problem solving. Again, people would love a world where there's no problems, but if you're doing this, there are, and part of the fun, frankly, for me, probably Rick, is solving problems.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had a recent transaction, and the seller had some supply chain issues that popped up. I mean, the week of closing, she has supply chain issues, and she's calling me going, Rick, what do we do? And I'm like, we call the buyer. Right now, we get on the phone, and the buyer had owned a business before and understood it. And they said, yes, we get this, we see it, and we're moving forward. Her concern was that they were going to back away and not do it. But when you disclose it properly and you come with not just a disclosure, but a solution on what you're doing about it and help them to understand, my experience is that the deal goes on and it gets done. And you just have to do it right. I love this. Love the conversation we're having. So let me skip. When we were at lunch, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm saying.
So when we were at lunch, we brought up the QSBS discussion about what these are, and you had made some points. I'd like to have you expound on that. What is a QSBS? How does it help people? How do you see it from a legal perspective?
So QSBS is qualified small business stock. It's what Rick is getting at is one of the provisions in the tax code aimed at helping businesses, startup businesses, get going. There's a very favorable tax result for people who invest in startup companies to encourage the investment. And the headline is, if and when you sell the stock of the business, so it now becomes successful, and you sell the company, your capital gains rate is 0%. And obviously 0% is very attractive. Absolutely. People love 0%. You don't like tax, but 0% tax people are up for. I can do the math on that. Correct. And it's very favorable. I would have, nothing is as simple as that. So you have to have held the stock for 5 years. And there's a cap. It's not unlimited 0%. The cap is either the higher of 10 million or 10 times your basis. So I don't know, if you invested 2 million, 10 times that is $20 million. Again, by the way, I'm not a tax lawyer, Rick. So anyone listening, this is like a B+ answer. We work with real talented tax lawyers and accountants to get you the A+ answer. But for purposes of this conversation, the point is it's again an incentive to invest in startups. So when people are forming their business and they're giving thought to the sort of company they want to form to do their business, I presume the crowd is, at least conversant enough with C corporation, S corporation, and LLC, limited liability companies, that the conversation we have on the front end with the CPAs around what type of entity, and every entity has pros and cons, and unfortunately there's no one size fits all. I can't say to you, oh, if you're going to form a business, it ought to be this type of business. There's pros and cons. But the reason Rick raises QSBS is this is a very, very exciting opportunity. Again, the 0% tax rate. And so one of the drivers of the decision of the entity to form is your ability, if you're thinking out in the future and saying, you know what, this is a type of business that I'm building today with plans to sell it. And you're looking forward and you're saying, boy, when I sell it, I would love to pay 0% tax. But by the way, we're talking federal tax rates. So the good, California, as always, doesn't know from 0% tax. So the California state tax applies even on the QSBS. Other states, some states follow the federal one. Other states, like California, impose state tax. But either way, you're saving what would be a 20% capital gains tax at the federal level. That's a big thing.
But taxes.
Sure. Form a C corporation. And without being a complete tax conversation, C corporations come with what the tax people call double taxation. So the corporation itself is a taxpayer. And then when the money comes out of the corporation, in other words, the owners of the business take distributions, that money is taxed. That's the double taxation. So speaking generally, you don't like paying tax. You certainly don't like to pay double tax. But if the classic is a Silicon Valley technology startup where they're going to be running losses, meaning, so again, if you have losses, you're not paying tax. So double tax at Rick's favorite rate of 0, Rick is going to pay 0% 2 times all day long. We'll do versus a company where you say, boy, we're going to have tremendous cash flow right out of the gate. If you're going to be paying taxes right out of the gate, you're not going to want to do double taxation. But without getting into the weeds more, it's why I say it's a conversation to be had on your choice of entity. But maybe to tie it all together, what I said to Rick at lunch was, for most of my career, this was never a conversation point, partially because the tax law changed. The tax law only since 2018 has been as favorable as we're describing. So QSBS has been around for many, many years, but was never at the 0% level, only since, I think, 2018. And so now, even though, of course, 2018, 7 years ago, it seems in the last year or two, people have started to pay more attention to this. And so we're having many more conversations around QSBS at formation than we otherwise were. And the challenge is you got to predict the future. You can't do it when Rick calls up and says, great news, I found a buyer, we're going to sell the company, you can't at that moment decide you're going to be QSBS. Remember, I said there's a 5-year hold period.
Yep.
5 years. How to do this? Unfortunately, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't have a time machine. You can't go back in time. So this is a conversation up front when you're forming the company. But as I say, just to repeat, the comment, this is part of a choice of entity conversation that we were never having previously, but it's become a big deal, and you can see why. It's very powerful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you're a tech startup, and you're looking to sell, even if you could, the first 10 million, you reduce your taxes, 20, 30% now, might even be more, 20 or 30% on 10 million is starting to be real money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. So thank you. So I want to ask you, the big question in my mind, is that in M&A, I'm like, how is M&A going to be changed with AI? And I'm starting to see it because today AI is the worst it's ever going to be.
Yep.
And I'm seeing so many things. Talk to me a little bit about how AI is changing the legal aspects of what you do.
We're seeing it. We're seeing it right now, Rick. This is going to be a massive change in the legal profession. So the stereotypical law firm, certainly doing M&A, is a pyramid with the senior lawyers on top and a number of junior lawyers below doing a bunch of work. The immediate obvious place for AI to come in is to replace or at least supplement the work that those junior lawyers are doing. And we're doing that. I'm doing that on a transaction right now. Due diligence is a phrase for the audience. This is a fancy phrase for the buyer's review of the company. In order to buy a company, you got to review the business of the company. You got to review the contracts, the customer contracts, and the bank documents. And you got to get yourself up to speed on the legal affairs of the company you're looking to buy. And traditionally, junior lawyers have spent days reading every customer contract, every vendor contract, every lease, every bank agreement to figure out what happens on the change of control. Very typically, a bank loan on a change of control has a due on sale clause. You got to pay back the bank. Yeah. Oftentimes, landlords have a consent right over the sale of the company, those sorts of things. And so we're using AI right now to review a whole bunch of contracts. At the moment, we're supplementing. So the AI is taking a first pass on the documents, and then the junior lawyers are spot checking. So if there's 100 agreements, AI is reviewing all 100, and the junior lawyers are picking 10 or 15 and reviewing to get confident in the AI. But ultimately, we're going to rely, assuming that spot check works, we're going to rely on the AI. And clients are pushing it as they should, because, again, for the audience, we lawyers still bill by the hour. And so if AI is taking X number of hours of work, that reduces the legal bill.
Mm-hmm.
I see it. Rick is right. This is the worst AI is ever going to be. And you can see AI progressing from there. So you could see AI going to, I'll tell you where we've seen it already. A letter of intent, which is the sort of the start off, the kickoff legal document for a transaction. It's in the group, the audience ought to think of it as if outline of the deal. I'll buy your company for X dollars. It's a little bit more than that, but in the headline, bunch of bullet points. And I'll hire Rick to be my CEO, and we'll do this and that, the outline of the business deal. We for sure have clients taking the letter of intent, running it through ChatGPT or something like that, and then coming to us, it's sort of reverse, and saying, hey, we want you to review ChatGPT's output.
Wow.
Right. We get that already today. And so you can see AI, again, if not replacing us, but supplementing us on letters of intent. And then going forward, even the merger, look, the goal ought to be, putting aside for the moment the impact on the profession and the business model and the associates that we employing all of that stuff. Look, you'd hope, like in other industries, that AI would be able to handle a significant chunk. I don't want to put a number on it, but a significant chunk of the reading and analysis, and save for the lawyers the real solid strategic advice that's needed. But the upper margin stuff. But it's going to impact the profession because that pyramid model of all the lawyers, everyone billing by the hour, much of that's going to be replaced by automation.
That is a dramatic change. I want to say monumental change to the industry.
Yeah.
I was reading recently, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, one of the big four accounting firms, they laid off 1,800 people, right? And it was lower level staff. They didn't blame AI, but you could tell. And so they're having AI replacing these lower level or even mid-level staff members. And so what you have in the old pyramid, you have the I want to just call us the old guys that are on top that are experienced, the partners, right? And then you don't have the entry-level staff anymore. So when the partners, the entry-level staff are future partners.
Right.
10 years of experience, roll the clock forward 10 years, they are the partners. They're the senior level management. Well, if you don't have those and they've been replaced with AI, who's going to replace senior level management 10 years from now? That's the thing that I wonder about. I'm like, okay, yeah, you can put someone in there, but as you know, with your experience, you're able to look at an AI generated output from ChatGPT and find the deficiencies, find the holes, right? Well, that experience takes time. That's not something that a computer model can generate. I mean, it's how do you interpret the data? The AI tool is going to give us the data. Well, how do we interpret it? What is our input like? How do we input the right data to get the right output? And so I see these roles just completely being turned upside down, both for accountants and attorneys. Interesting times, but we're going to have to be careful with it because we'll have a huge vacuum at the top end, senior level management, when those guys retire and you don't have these people with the 10-year experience to replace them.
For sure. No, the accounting analogy is right on. They run the same business model as the lawyers. And everything we're talking about, I know it not because I read some book or, read ChatGPT. It's because I've been living and breathing it for the last 25 plus years. So about that experience, that's frankly the difference between me and the junior lawyer isn't brains or smarts. They may even outsmart me. I've got the experience. That's what I'm trading.
Yep. And you know what? You have a nose, and a nose can sniff out a problem, right? You just kind of look at it and you get a feel, and you probably do like I do. We'll look at a transaction, we'll look at something, and there's just something that's off, and we can't quite pinpoint it. We just have that feeling, and AI lacks feeling, lacks a nose. They can't figure it out, and oftentimes that's the death knell. That's the deal killer in there, and we have a sense for it, and then we go dig and find it. And anyway, interesting. So anyway, let's talk about horror stories. I was talking to someone today about they're considering selling, and they've had someone come up and get an unsolicited offer, and talking about NDA. So tell me about your horror stories with lack of an NDA.
Yes. So look, this ties to Rick. We touched on it a bit earlier about mistakes people make. So mistakes become horror stories.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll hit a couple things. I'll see if I can link them all together. NDA, of course, it's non-disclosure agreement. I think everyone's familiar with that. And so any buyer is going to be asking, I said it earlier, for information about the business. To learn about the business, you got to ask a bunch of questions, and not all of it's verbal. Some of the question might be, let me see your financial statement. So the seller has to share, well, let me see your tax returns. Let me see your customer list. All fair questions, but without a non-disclosure agreement, you're essentially just posting your secrets up on the internet for anybody to see. So that's an obvious mistake of, not getting legal protection around your secrets. The other mistake is, even with an NDA, you ought to be thoughtful about the timing and the cadence of sharing the secret.
Great point. Great point. There's a time and a season.
look, sometimes it's because there are bad people in the world who don't honor their contracts and don't follow their NDAs. More likely, so I don't want to ascribe everyone to that, but there is an element of that. But there's a time and a season, Rick. If it's very early and someone just calls up and says, hey, I think I might be interested, maybe let me learn a little bit about your company. You might say, no problem, here's some high-level financial information about us. But in that example, you wouldn't share your customer list and your margins, and certainly not your secret formula at that date, because the deal may not go anywhere. And so it's just full common sense. Even with an NDA, there's no reason to share beyond what ought to be shared at that time. So that's, I think, right, Rick, you and I have both seen people, they're so excited about the opportunity for the deal, they forget the NDA.
They do.
The other, go ahead.
No. And the other thing with that is they just get kind of Twitter-pated, right? And it's the first time they've done this, maybe the only time they're ever going to sell. They get excited, they get emotional. Right. And I think you as an M&A attorney and me as an M&A advisor, we bring a rational element to the transaction. The logical side says, no, absolutely don't do it. They're like, yeah, but I like them. No, doesn't matter if you like them.
and a lot of people are people pleasers. A lot of successful business people, again, it's not a knock on them. It's why they're successful. They're in the customer service business, just like you and I. And so they're used to, if someone rings up and says, hey, can you do X for me? They want to show how terrific they are, and they get right on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a role for someone to say, let's slow it down a bit. Let's think this through. I was going to say the other classic, and it speaks, again, I'm praising Rick and everyone in Rick's profession. What sounds like an innocuous question of, hey, let me see your financials, or let me see your tax returns, which are, equivalent, or, another flavor of tax returns. And people often just hand those over right away. And I'm not suggesting they hide them. It's a fair question from buyer, but they often need to be part of a story. And when I say story, I don't mean fiction. I don't mean make up financials. What I mean is somebody buying a company is buying the company in the future. They're buying the future cash flows of it. Yep. And of course, historical financials, it's right there in the word. Those are reporting what the historical situation. And to some extent, there's an analogy. Hey, last year you made $10 million. What makes you think you're going to make, $200 million next year? There's a consistency, but there's also, where I'm going is, in Rick's world, there's a concept of add backs or pro forma, or in plain English, here's what the business looks like in your hands, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer. Mean, hey, right, you're going to add this to the business. You're going to bring in new customers. You're going to put more cash to work. Therefore, you can build the new factory, or whatever the story is. Or many of these private businesses have personal expenses run through them, right? If you own business, right, all your automobile purchases are going to be run through the business. I'm not giving tax advice. This may or may not be legit as far as the IRS is concerned, but in the real world, people are putting expenses through the business. You need the garage door repaired at their house. The garage door repairman bills the business. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying this is what happens. Such that, look, the game with the IRS on your tax return is to show as low an income as possible, so that you're paying as low a tax as possible. Versus what you want to show the buyer is as much income as possible. And those are so there's just two different purposes to the financial information. So somebody like Rick would wrap the historical financial information. I called it a story earlier, but I want people to hear, I'm not suggesting fiction or make up. I'm suggesting the add back of, hey, in your hands, the business will no longer have the garage door repair person's bills. The business in your hands will no longer have the owner's 3 personal sports cars. the business in your hands won't have the vacation charges. And the corollary, and the profits are going to be higher, where the income is going to be higher because of that new factory that you're going to build, or whatever. So all to paint the picture of the future of the business. So the mistake, very long way to get to the mistake is simply handing over the historical financials without the cover story. And so that's a classic mistake. And again, speaks to the role that Rick and people in his business provide.
It's like giving them half a book. Let's take a novel and tear out the ending, tear off the cover, right? I love that analogy, Scott. That is so well said. People just hand over the financials. They're like, great, I need financials. Great. Need taxes. Great. Let's send you the whole tax return that has all our social security numbers and all our personal information. No NDA. Great.
Really, the perfect tax return, again, I'm being a little bit glib when I say this, one where you say to the IRS, boy, you're not going to believe it. We had another terrible year. We lost a ton of money for tax purposes.
Yeah.
Right? But you don't want to share that with a buyer, because now the buyer is going to say, well, why would I pay you a lot of money for your business? You run losses. And so they're two different audiences.
Yep, they certainly are. Well, Scott, it's been so great to have you on the program today. We really appreciate your time. Is there any other thing that you wanted to share before we end?
Look, I think we covered a lot here, Rick. And by the way, thanks for having me. It's been terrific. Look, I think that the message for the audience, they probably beat them over the head with it, is if you find yourself fortunate enough to have an opportunity to buy or sell a business, you want to surround yourself with a team of professionals, folks that have done it before. I know it's self-serving, but look, there's costs. Rick doesn't work for free. I don't work for free. There's cost involved in bringing professionals on board. But if you find the right professional, they're going to add more value than their cost. And look, don't go doing it alone. Is really the point.
Yep, don't go it alone. I love that advice. Thanks again, and we appreciate people tuning in to our show, M&A Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. Have a great day. Thank you, Scott. Oh, before we end, how do our listeners get in touch with you if they have a question and they'd like to follow up?
Yeah, if you see my firm at Sklar Kirsch, the website is the firm name, Sklar Kirsch, SKLARKIRSH.com. You'll find us on the internet, of course.
Okay, perfect. And what's your email?
It's S. Ehrlich. So my first initials for Scott, S. Ehrlich, EHRLICH at Sklar Kirsch, SKLARKIRSH.com. Thanks for that.
Perfect. Thank you, and have a great day.
All right, take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for attending our podcast. We invite you to join us for future episodes of M&A, Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. You can also visit us at www.bsalesgroup.com or email Rick directly at rick@bsalesgroup.com.